The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be the most TV dudes you'll ever listen to? As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess, we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show. Hey there, TV lovers and friends of justice. I am the protector of this podcast, Adam, and I'm ready to entertain you with my mighty television memories.
I'm William Bruce West, aka Too Smart for TV Man, and this is Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s.
But before we get into the topic at hand, we must first look back at our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Spoon! Theme song.
Well, every child is on the lookout for a hero, super or otherwise, to identify with, and TV animation was full of good guys to look up to that were ready to save the day. Adam, who was your favorite childhood TV superhero?
Oh man, it was hard to deny Spider-Man. It feels like a generic answer, but he was my guy. From the moment I saw the solo Spider-Man and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoons, I was hooked. Then, the live action one was on the Electric Company. And so I was really, really into Spider-Man immediately because he was such a happy hero, and it made him very inviting to a 3-4-year-old. And then the merchandise was just everywhere, so you could plug in to Spider-Man fandom immediately. I had the Mego doll, I had the Marvel Superhero Secret Wars action figure, I had a ski mask and socks and t-shirts. There's lots of pictures of me as a kid, just Spider-Man all over the place. Coloring books. I have this Fisher Price film reel thing viewer that you put up to your eye and turn. There was a segment from the cartoon, Pez dispensers, whatever. It pretty much all of that from my childhood I have kept. I have all of those items because he was my guy. Even when I was 4, I drew webs all over my body with a black marker. I was just sitting in an armchair in my underwear, and I just started drawing the Spider-Man webs on myself. I wanted the costume that way. So, it worked exactly as it should have, because then Spider-Man was on the first comic book I ever bought from a 7-Eleven spinner rack. It's just oh, there he is. Okay, I got to have this book now and learn more about him. So I would say it died down a little bit, late 80s, early 90s. And then as soon as the Spider-Man show was premiering on Fox Kids, and we had this all new 90s attitude Spider-Man animated series, then I bought those action figures and those coloring books and the cereal, the bathroom kits and everything, Happy Meal toys, whatever I could get my hands on. So I never tired of Spider-Man, really. He was always simmering even when it wasn't white hot. But even in the 90s, when I was probably 13, 14, you remember those mall kiosks where you could Photoshop your face into a magazine cover or whatever? So my local one had one where it was the 90s animated series. It's Peter Parker pulling his shirt open in an alleyway and revealing the costume underneath, and you could put your face on there. And I still have that to this day also, because I had my head inserted on there, so it's just it always came back to Spidey for me. But how about you?
That's really cool though, because I think about that time and Spider-Man never was in my life. Where I encountered Spider-Man was in the closing credits of Muppet Babies, and it was that CGI rotoscoped 80s Spider-Man that was actually terrifying. So I think that pushed me away from the character, but the way you are with Spider-Man, Batman for me. And this was before Batmania in the movie. I remember before they were all CVS, like we had like regional drug stores, and ours was called People's Drug. And I remember I begged my mom for like the Superpowers Batman from the drugstore, and like there was a smaller carded version that was made like particularly for like pharmacies and stuff because
Oh.
it didn't take up as much space as the regular card. So like collectors will know there's like the full card Superpowers, but then there's the narrow card. So like I got the narrow card Batman. I'm probably like 3 at this point, and it's probably not until I'm like 7 or 8 I thought Batman could fly, because I guess I didn't notice the rope. Like it's just he's just always kind of like in the air, and the cape is all kind of animated, you know. So like I got the Superpowers Batmobile, I got the Delta Probe 1. Like I was a Superpowers kid in the moment, even though I didn't know there was like cartoons or comic books of this or anything of it. I just loved Batman. So then like as I'm getting older, Batman 66 is constantly in rotation, so like that's having an influence on me because it's on at least like twice a day, and I'm building grappling hooks out of constructs, not realizing they're not gonna support my weight, so I'm falling off banisters and stuff like that, and I'm making my own capes, and then that rolls into Batmania. But like I've talked to our friend Chad about this, where like I don't remember Batman coming out. Like I don't know if I was in a coma, and I know that like it was this huge deal, and I remember everything surrounding it, like people getting the bat symbol, cutting their hair and things like that. But the actual theatrical release of Batman, I missed it. I did not know it was, because we weren't a movie going family. There are a lot of people our age was like, oh, we went to the movies all the time. Like, no, by that point we had seen the re-release of Snow White and Fried Green Tomatoes. Like that's no, or was it Driving Miss Daisy? Like those were the movies I got taken to because I was raised by the Black Golden Girls. So like Batman 89, I didn't know it had come out until I got the VHS for Christmas that year. And this isn't the era where you're just commonly buying VHS tapes. Like this is the start of that. If you ever look at the listings for VHS like back in that day, the suggested retail price is like $100 because no one's supposed to own them. It was like a rental thing. But like this is where it's like, hey, no, you could buy this and watch it whenever you want. You don't have to worry about Blockbuster not having it, you know. So it's like I opened it up because it was wrapped and I thought it was like a Nintendo game. I'm like, no, it's a little too narrow. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, when did this come out? And then like I immediately went to watch it, you know. But like it's always been Batman, and I still hadn't discovered comics. I don't discover comics until like 92, and by that point it's kind of like the X-Men thing. You get into Jim Lee X-Men and it happens to be when the animated series starts. Well, I mean, you've got the Emmy award winning Batman the Animated Series, and like that really doesn't stop for another 10 years, because then it goes into Superman, and then the new Batman Adventures, and then Justice League, and then Justice League Unlimited. So it's like I was just on that train from then on. It's always been Batman.
Well, Marvel and DC well represented on both sides of the hosting table here. And it is interesting, you know, in my area, and I don't know where it was for you, but like the Batman 66 reruns were on our Fox affiliate, and they played on Saturday afternoons. That's where we saw Batman 66. Speaking of which, you know, that show got the green light we talked about last time as kind of a mid-season replacement show back in the 60s. But we want to find out how this show got the green light. Or is it the blue light? This isn't Kmart. Anyway. So, in the early 90s, the Fox Kids network was created in reaction to the hugely popular The Disney Afternoon programming block that played in syndication on weekday afternoons nationwide. Fox Kids found its biggest success early on with cartoons starring superheroes and had an amazing track record with those. So, as Will just mentioned, Batman the Animated Series from animator Bruce Timm and writer Paul Dini raised the bar for adaptations of comic book heroes in 92, and the X-Men animated series was equally successful the same year. And then in 93, the debut of the live-action Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on Fox Kids just blew all other children's action-adventure shows out of the water, becoming a cultural phenomenon. The next year, with Spider-Man the Animated Series, it was another undeniable hit. But 1994 was also the year that kids were introduced to the big blue hero we'll be discussing at length this episode. But first, Will, I know you were very involved in this world. So how would you describe the excitement created by the Fox Kids network, and what percentage of your TV watching hours did it actually consume?
Oh, I've mentioned before, I was a charter member of the Fox Kids Club. And the thing is like, at that time, we were used to syndicated cartoon blocks, like in the morning and in the afternoon. But it was really a regional thing. It varied from like market to market. And this was kind of a big deal because just like in prime time, kids everywhere watching the same thing at the same time. You know, like before you had this like unified kind of like network, I could be watching Thundercats while a kid in Baltimore is watching He-Man. And it's just like, if you happen to go to the same camp that summer, you're getting into arguments like, no, it comes on at 3:30. You know, that kind of thing. But like also, I feel like this was a very big era for like marketing towards kids to make them feel special, giving them something of their own, you know? And like even the things of like marketing like Apple Jacks, like why do you like them? They don't taste like apples. We just do. It's ours, you know? You're like, so it's like it's that ownership of like kids have this like corner of their own, and just like the things you could mail away and get. It was an era of that, and I used to love getting mail. I've subscribed to magazines since I was like 5, you know, like Electric Company and Kid City, because I loved that the little label would say Master William Bruce West. This was a thing. It's like, hey, it's free. You get your parents to send this thing in for you, and you get like a membership kit. And I remember like when it showed up, because I didn't expect much, and there was really no precedent for it. But it's like, I get this large envelope in the mail, like a college trying to recruit me, and it's got like a poster and a folder and a membership card and a certificate, and I'm gonna get a magazine whenever they feel like sending it, because it was really like quarterly. You only got like 4 a year, but like you never paid for it, so whatever. It was a surprise when it showed up. It created this unified kind of voice, so it was no longer this whole like channel 54, channel 45. Like they would brand the magazine with your local affiliate, so it would say like Fox 5 and maybe show like, oh, Fresh Prince 5 days a week, but the insides for the most part were all the same, you know? So it created a unified voice in the dawn of that like Burger King Kids Club, Fox Kids Club. Everything's neon and fun, and let's just go watch cartoons and have fun. Like there's not even like a spokesperson. It's the spotlight. You know, it's like it's the Fox searchlight. But like we still knew what that meant, whether it was like the droopy detective mysteries, or like Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates, or Spider-Man, you know? How about you? What did you think of it?
Yeah, like I remember it first kind of just appearing to me when Batman the Animated Series came out. I think that was the draw that pulled me in to watching it on a regular basis, because I grew up on Nickelodeon as the network for children, originally creating that vibe. But I felt like nothing could match the promotion and, like you said, the kind of the cohesiveness of the Fox Kids network universe, because it was presented as like a clubhouse that had all the best shows. And of course, again, the superhero shows were getting my attention. But then after all the comic book adventures, I would stick around for Bobby's World or Life with Louie, to a lesser extent, Eek the Cat, the Terrible Thunder Lizards, and all that. Kumbaya. No, I don't.
It's my girlfriend Annabelle. Isn't she pretty?
But they all felt like they belonged to the same universe somehow. We've talked about how you sent me all your childhood Fox Kids recorded tapes, and like on all the bumpers, there are sometimes, especially when they would do like the Fox Kids TV takeover, things like that, they would combine all the different characters into one screen, you know, like they'd do all these layers. So it literally looked like they could exist together. But yeah, it really pulled me in on Saturday mornings also, because I remember the Fox Action Theater, I believe, was the Saturday morning thing where they would show Batman the Animated Series, and it had its own little bumper with all these like doors opening and Batman going across the screen. And do you remember that?
They used that during weekdays too.
Okay.
But like they pretty much only used it for Batman and X-Men.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like a dividing line, you know? It's like in case it was too violent, because they never mixed Batman between like eek. It's like Batman and X-Men ended thing, you know?
Yeah, definitely. But on the weekdays, like the only time after school that I changed the channel from Fox and watching all the Fox Kids Network programming was for some reruns of Saved by the Bell on WGN. So I'd flip over to those, but then I'd just flip back to Fox Kids, and then I would stay on Fox Kids until the reruns of The Simpsons started in syndication. So it was just like Fox kind of like ruled everything for me most of my TV watching hours. But I really was excited by just the iconography of the Fox Kids Network, because they never seemed to falter. You know, it was just like everything they put out, even if it wasn't like your favorite, you're just like, yeah, but it's Fox Kids, so it must be cool. You know, until you got older and jaded, you know, but you would start out saying pretty great.
But like you were saying, even the bumpers though, like when they would put characters together, it seems sort of natural. Like I know when Kids WB launches, they try something similar and I don't think they ever achieve it. Like WB was very good at making us think their young hot stars hung out together, but their animated shows were just all the crap Fox Kids wouldn't take, you know? So then it was like, you would see like Pikachu, and then they got the Power Rangers license briefly. It was like somebody got Photoshop or Canva, but like Fox Kids, it knew what it was doing, but then it also spawned a lot of imitators too, you know?
For sure, yeah. People saw what was working. What's the name of the gal who was like the main head of that? It's like Marjorie something, or
Margaret Loesch.
Yeah, Margaret
like,
Loesch.
She pretty much like allied with Haim Saban, because the weird thing, and this is an episode to itself, but like Saban basically co-owned Fox Kids. So like when it sold to Disney, basically everything we talk about as Fox Kids is owned by Disney now, except for Power Rangers. Because when they bought Fox Kids, they bought the Saban library, except for Power Rangers, because he bought it back from them. But like everything that we want to talk about is buried in a vault somewhere, like Eek, and like the entire schedule, Disney just doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even like, again, going through your old tapes, when you get later into the 90s, you're like, The Magician? What is this animated adventure series I've never heard of? You know, like,
the worst is like during the anime like explosion, because I swear they showed Escaflowne once. They aired it 1 week, and I don't know if it was a ratings thing or if somebody was like, oh, this content doesn't work. But it was like, it was never heard from again. And this is pre like internet. Like, yeah, there's chat rooms, but there's no like social media for us to be like, hey, what happened to Escaflowne? You know, like it just disappeared.
Well, so there were the huge hits that have lasted. There were the complete misses, you know, and then there are the shows that were somewhere in between. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because without the machine behind the Fox Kids Network, without the goodwill of all the other shows, would the Tick have been given a chance? We're going to find out in our elevator pitch.
The Tick began as a mascot for the New England Comics chain of retail stores, created by 18-year-old Ben Edlund, and eventually published as a black and white comic book series written and drawn by Edlund between 1988 and 1989, with many spin-offs created from the vast universe of wacky costume characters who inhabited the fictional metropolis called the City. While not a direct parody of any one superhero, the series told the story of a muscular and delusional man in a blue spandex outfit with antenna, who fancied himself a superpowered dispenser of justice that nobody was asking for. In fact, the original story arc involved the Tick being a nuisance for a generic Superman-style hero who was already taking care of business in the city, which also happened to be populated by endless wannabe superheroes with dubious or debatable powers. One of these, an accountant named Arthur, who sported a white moth-inspired costume with working wings, became the sidekick of the titular hero. The Tick himself describes his abilities as being nigh invulnerable, and was undeniably indestructible as he often fell from great heights or caused damage to any buildings he bounded upon. Adam, have you read the original The Tick comics?
I got a trade that came out in 1996 as soon as it was available. They called it The Naked City. They colorized the stories and put in a lot of interesting stuff because I enjoyed this series so much that I wanted to know the source material, but it wasn't widely available. I was collecting comics prior to the cartoon series coming out, and I had never seen The Tick. You couldn't get your hands on it. It was kind of an underground thing. And so I started reading that, and it is so much fun. The original universe is not that different from the animated series. And so you really get into it. Now, there are like some more direct parodies in the comics. Like we say, there is a Superman type character. They call him the Caped Wonder. In kind of like a secondary story arc, there's an Elektra from Daredevil type thing, and the Tick is teamed up with this gal named Oedipus instead of Elektra, and they're fighting ninjas, and this guy who's the CEO who wants to start the Ninja World chain of theme parks and merchandise ninjas, definitely playing off of Ninja Turtles, which itself was a parody of the Frank Miller Daredevil stuff. So there's a lot of references, but it always goes its own direction. And so as soon as I got that, I was digging through back issue bins, and I was able to pull up like random issues, like, and they did start doing new original stuff, but not a lot. There was never like a huge ongoing Tick series, even at the height of, when they were trying to merchandise it. There was stuff coming out every once in a while, but there was this other character called the Chainsaw Vigilante in the early 90s boom of comics when everything was grim and gritty and extreme. And he was a guy who, leather pants, leather jacket, and he had a paper mask, held on by a string that had like a weird off-kilter smiley face drawn on it. And he had like a big red, like, pompadour kind of curly hair thing coming out, but then he had a chainsaw and he would just kind of threaten people with it. He wouldn't do much with it, and there was one story where he did like battle the Tick, but then they tried to spin him off and it had like a chrome shiny cover on it and Chainsaw Vigilante, but I think it only made it like one or two issues. I have that, but then later they teamed them up. Like, this is like, maybe like 10 years ago, they did a Tick and the Chainsaw Vigilante comic, so he did get to come back. And even like the Tick has had crossovers here and there. One of my other favorite characters is Mike Allred's Madman. The Tick and Madman had a crossover comic, and even like Free Comic Book Day, every once in a while, they're putting out Tick comics. And to this day, they're continuing to keep him alive. So I've definitely read the stories and enjoy them just as much as I enjoyed the series. But did you ever have any passing like viewing of the Tick in comic book form?
Yeah, like you were saying, the Free Comic Book Day stuff. Like, because I used to be a completist. Like, I made sure I got like every book that was offered, and then like in the beginning of Free Comic Book Day you could do that, and then as it got bigger and there were more and more publishers, shops started ordering the books they thought people would want. So then more shops stayed away from the silver publishers, which are basically the indie ones. So like things like the Tick got harder to find. But that really is my familiarity with the character. He's a lot like Ernest, and then like he started as this like regional mascot and then takes on a life of its own, and like, so that's how I've looked at him. And like you were saying with the crossovers, he plays well with others. Like, I have read a lot of things where the Tick might pop up. Like, he's very big into like cameos in random places, but an actual Tick book starring the Tick written by Edlin, I have not read. And in fact, I found the omnibus while thrifting a couple years ago, and it's on my shelf, but like I've never been motivated to like, all right,
even for the show, you couldn't crack it open.
There's so many incarnations though. It's like, and we got more Tick to talk about, so I got time.
Well, let's talk about the thing you probably are most familiar with, because the Tick cartoon series debuted on Fox Kids in September of 1994 as part of their Saturday morning programming block. And Ben Edlund was very involved in the creation of the series, and he wrote on a lot of the episodes. In fact, like this is something like where he was approached like pretty early on to be like, oh, people like the idea of this Tick character. Let's merchandise it. Let's turn it into a show. And eventually he ends up with Sunbow, who people know Sunbow. They were doing all these, G.I. Joe and all these different shows in the 80s, and they're looking for something in the 90s. And so they start developing it. They give him a writing partner. Neither of them had written for television or animation, and their first script was terrible. And everybody's like, no, we don't want this. And then they tried again, and Fox is like, you know what? Actually, okay, you're getting somewhere. We will take this. And what's fun about it, though, is that because Ben Edlund is right there in the thick of it, it actually maintains the same absurd comedic tone of the original comic book, though slightly softened for younger viewers. Now, as far as the cast, the Tick himself was voiced by Townsend Coleman, better known to children of the era as Michelangelo on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, while Arthur was voiced originally by a hero of mine, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees. That was just for season 1, though. By season 2, Townsend Coleman's fellow Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles castmate Rob Paulson, who played Raphael, is now voicing Arthur for seasons 2 and 3. There was even a third turtle in the mix here. Cam Clark, the voice of Leonardo, played Deflightermouse. So there's a lot of turtles going on here. It's a good lineage to be pulling from. But the show ran for those 3 seasons, 1994 to 1996, only 36 episodes. Eventually, like much later, we got DVD sets, and I have those. There were a few VHS tapes that were released at the time, but there's something that I'm curious to talk to you about quickly here, Will, which is the failed toy line by Bandai. There was Taco Bell kids meals. There were a few books, like I have one called Mighty Blue Justice, which came out after the second season, which kind of digs deeper into the world as if it was written by the Tick and Arthur in their universe, and case logs, and we met these people. There was bendy figures, but this Bandai action figure series feels like a home run at this time when 90s boys action figures, everything's hitting, and this thing did not sell. Like, do you remember seeing these toys, Will, and do you have a theory as to why it didn't catch on?
Oh, I definitely remember seeing them, because let's look at the timeline here. This is 94. This is season 2 of Power Rangers, also being made by Bandai. And Bandai almost comes out of nowhere as far as American toys go. We're used to Kenner, we're used to Hasbro, we're used to Mattel, but like Bandai in America, Power Rangers was like a really big footprint for them. I'm not going to say it was their first thing, because I think they did some transforming thing that we eventually licensed and blah blah blah, but like Bandai was cock of the walk right now. So like I remember these toys is probably one of the first in the like KB 3 for $10 situation. Like when we look back on KB toys, that's all people remember, because like in the final years it was this like clearinghouse of just like variant action figures. But the very first line I can think of was the Tick. You could complete this line for nothing. And there were times where I thought about it, and I was like, nah, I'd rather buy this one Power Ranger than buy 15 Tick toys. And I mean, a lot of it's gonna come up in the jeers, but this was not a cartoon that kids were dying to have toys of. At the end of the day, this was not a cartoon for kids. I don't care if it aired on Saturday mornings. There were toyetic aspects to it, like Dinosaur Neil. Who doesn't want a dinosaur with the face of a middle-aged man? Like, at least just the whimsical nature of it, But I mean, ultimately, I don't see it. And there were the Taco Bell kids meals. I still have one of those. It's like a Tick that balances on a brick wall.
Me too.
And over the past 30 years, I've thought about getting rid of it, but it's still to this day one of the best fast food premiums I've ever come across. So it's like I don't have a huge affinity for the Tick, but credit where credit's due, And so Bandai wasn't bringing all the bells and whistles to this like they did with things like Power Rangers or Beetleborgs or any of the like Saban stuff. These are pretty straightforward action figures that could have been made by anyone. They tended to have an action feature, which not everybody loves because it tends to hinder like playability. And another weird side effect is over time, the plastic used for the torso is not the same as the plastic used for the arm. So if you find them even carded, they're discolored now.
Yep.
They weren't built fun then, and they didn't age well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is the toys don't come with accessories. It's just the character, it's just the figure. They had like one playset thing that was like, there's this episode very early on where the Tick has this box that's supposed to show how invulnerable he is.
That's the pilot.
Yeah, it's the pilot episode, and he's basically beaten up by the thing, and it gets destroyed because it can't hurt him. And it's that kind of thing. But yeah, and I think what it comes down to with these toys, I've recently been reading about, action figure manufacturing and all that stuff. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that because this show is so comedic in nature, the adventure side of it, which is what action figures are for, the little boys are saying, oh, this gives me power and I can act out my power fantasies. It doesn't give you the ability to act out comedy unless you're a comedian, a budding funny kid. And so like, you're just like, yeah, the Tick wearing a t-shirt, that says I love wheat, random stuff. You're like, what does this do for me? And again, they didn't really have accessories. So it's like, I can't even really have him break through a wall or something, like whatever it is. And so I think, Bandai, again, relatively new at this point. So they maybe just had not hooked into what kids were expecting out of action figures. And so it feels like, yeah, there were a lot of characters. They did a lot of villains. They did the supporting characters. They had enough variations on the Tick. They had like the mucus Tick. Like there's this episode where he actually gets like made out of boogers. There's like a booger based Tick and all this kind of stuff, So it's just like that kind of thing is there if you're like somebody who loved the series and just want to see all the characters. But for playability, yeah, it lacked so much, unfortunately.
That's a good point about the comedy, because that's probably why the Police Academy like toy line failed, because like those are R-rated movies, and we always have that joke about like, oh, they made Rambo cartoons and RoboCop cartoons. The Police Academy is a different kind of R-rated, and like they made a cartoon and a toy line, and they wonder why it failed.
But I mean, at least to the Police Academy toys by Ketter, like you would have Zed on a skateboard, you could push a button and his pants would fall down and he'd have boxer shorts underneath or something. Like they had action figure accessories and they had action features that were funny. So like you could at least get the comedy out of that. The Tick just had nothing in terms of the toys. Again, great representations of the characters. They look like they came right off the screen, but then what's the next step? The kid has to do all the work.
Right.
But I do have to ask you though, you're plugged into Fox Kids. Did you watch The Tick as much as you watched the other Fox Kids network shows?
Nope, I didn't. I don't really know why, because the odd thing is that, like, I feel like my mom caught an episode, because this is like right when she retired, and like she liked it. And I've mentioned before that I tried to like latch onto these like shared things like Family Dog and all these, like, hey, look, we can watch this together. But like it usually turned into like some passing fancy, and it was never like replicated again. So like I knew it existed. Maybe it came on at the same time as California Dreams, because this is that point in time. Like by this point, I am not even awake on Saturday mornings, and I have 2 VCRs set to record what I'm gonna watch when I wake up after 1. This didn't make the cut.
Wow, yeah, that's wild, because this was one of those shows that when I waned on the melodrama of, everything that was X-Men, it was big boom, but after a while I was just like, I know, but these people are just whining about, whatever. And then like Batman was cool, but Batman was grim and gritty, and I could only take so much because I love to laugh. So when The Tick was on, I was just like, yes, finally something silly, something I could just like laugh at the absurdity of everything. Like literally every second there was something new and weird happening on screen, but it wasn't madcap. And so like I always was tuning into The Tick. Like that's what I was looking forward to on Saturday mornings.
But see, this tracks because this is subversive like the Dana Carvey show.
Yes.
And like, as with the Dana Carvey show, they were both ahead of their time. I can watch this and I can appreciate it now, but like the Dana Carvey show, I probably hate it. Like, a better thing to say, like, I'm not gonna say I hated it. I like what the Tick represented because he was bright and colorful and he was associated with comics. And I'm still like a comic novice and I'm trying to like suck up everything I can at this point in time. But the Tick is one of those deals. There's this meme going on right now about like how on social media there are these concepts that people claim they're fans of, but they really only know them through memes. They know nothing about them. Like the Kingdom Hearts games or Neon Genesis Evangelion. Like these are things like you know when it's a clip from that, but have you really watched the whole thing? And that's the Tick to me. I know Spoon, I know there were toys, I know Arthur, I know he comes from some indie comic I never see in stores, so that was enough to get my vote. But I think, and I almost feel like network execs thought that they were going to get some kind of like anthropomorphic second coming of Ninja Turtles, and that's not what they got. And that's not what I got, because I'm still in this like Ninja Turtles Battletoads, like that hasn't waned for me. I'm not like lame enough to like biker mice, but like I'll give this Tick guy a chance, you know?
You know what's so funny to me, Will, is you often speak of Battletoads in the same breath as Ninja Turtles, but it's so funny because all they got was one animated pilot that nobody saw and a couple video games and the Nintendo Power. I think there was like one or two comic strips in Nintendo Power, but it's so funny to me because like just the iconography of Battletoads, it jumps out at you and you're like, but it wasn't a thing.
Like it was effective marketing, and this could also be like a regional thing, you know, because like my friends around here in Maryland were really into Battletoads, but like you said, there was no real like animated series, anything like that. I think a lot of it's like the potential of Battletoads. Battletoads is one of those franchises like in my heart that they never maximize.
Yeah.
The same way I feel that some people probably felt about Bucky O'Hare. Like Bucky O'Hare seems like a missed opportunity. I don't know if Neil Adams got in the way or if like the studio just didn't know what to do with it. But Bucky O'Hare should have been Turtles too. You know, like it should have been a seamless transition, and it was not. So that's the way I look at Battletoads. They both are like amphibians, and like they both fight, and it should be, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, Will. So you said you weren't watching a lot of Tick at the time, but now you've had a chance to check in and see what it's all about. And we've kind of already started in on a little bit of these, but we got to find out about our cheers. So let us find out what works about the Tick. What is it that, you know, again, a lot of people say, oh, I remember the Tick, but did they stick around to watch? They may have stuck around for a few reasons. And one of those things is, I think, the animation on this series is beautiful. We're not talking about something that would be on like liquid television on MTV. You know, this isn't Eon Flux. This isn't the Max. It's not super trippy. And it's also not like high level like Batman the Animated Series. But what it is finely crafted. In rewatching the series just these last few weeks as we've been preparing, I've just struck by just the camera angles they're choosing to animate things in, the style of like jokes that they're doing is very different. This is not flat animation. Like it really does feel like they're giving you every direction, even though it's not a 3D show in any way. Like it just feels like they made use of this animated space in a way you weren't seeing on a regular basis, but also not in a way to make it look realistic. But it definitely just, it pops. A lot of times like characters flying at the camera or the camera's panning back as things are happening. Like there's just so much movement in the series. And I just think from an animation standpoint, it's probably not what people would think of first thing from the Tick, but it really strikes me every time I go back. I'm like visually interesting in addition to the comedy that I was tuning in for.
You're right. It's a beautiful show. Even almost by today's standards, in the sense that like we've moved towards like flash animation or just like we've gotten more simplistic to crank them out quicker. Like it's a beautiful show. I can't deny that. One thing though that also meant a lot to me that I liked from it, and this is going to sound crazy to some people, but I appreciated that the voice work is just as good as the animation here, and they are by familiar voices, but you can't tell they're familiar voices. By that, I mean, we've settled into this thing with animation right now where a lot of people are being cast for roles because they have distinctive voices and not because they have a range of voices. So it's like we're saying Townsend Coleman. I listen to The Tick and I don't hear Michelangelo because Townsend Coleman is talented. But then you look at something modern, I don't feel like Sterling Archer should sound like Bob Belcher. But it's just that people have fallen in love with H. John Benjamin's voice. So like, I miss this era of cartooning, whereas like there are these talented people. Mickey Dolenz, I don't know what he had better to do in 1995, but like watching season 1, I'm not like, hey, that's Mickey Dolenz. I'm like, that sounds like what Arthur probably would sound like. Oh, hey, it also happens to be Mickey Dolenz, you know? But like, that was the part that I walked away with today. But now that you mention like the look, it really does stick with you that like it looks great. Also comparing it to things on Fox Kids at the time, we will probably get to this show and it will probably be like a humdinger, but I hated the Spider-Man series because it always looked washed out to me. There's something about the colors there. It was like it was faded. It didn't pop like X-Men popped, and it didn't pop like the Tick pops. Looking at it, it doesn't look as old as it is. And like, it's a joy to watch. I just think it might be too smart for his audience, but we will talk about that in cheer.
Yeah, definitely. And so what I think is the secret sauce of The Tick is the vast nature of the cast, not the voice actors, but literally the characters that inhabit the city, villains and heroes alike. There is an endless supply. Every episode, you're introduced to like at least 3 or 4 new characters in addition to the other ones hanging around. And they all just have ridiculous concepts. From the earliest episodes, you have Chairface Chippendale, who is an erudite, like villainous mastermind who he's got a dress shirt on, he's got his slacks on, he's wearing gloves, and his head is a chair. His head is literally just a wooden chair that sticks out of his collar. And what's he going to do? What's his plan? This is the other thing. He is going to carve his name into the moon with a super laser. And so he does this and he gets as far as he can before he's foiled. But like stuff like that. Or, there is a character called One Ton who's kind of like the Blob from X-Men, but they plus it up. He has a hand puppet that's this little green creature called Handy. And Handy, can talk kind of autonomous in a way, and hey, I'm Handy. The Tick, I'm gonna get you. It's a terrible voice. It's terrible ventriloquism, whatever's happening there, But it's just the silly nature of everybody you're introduced to. Like I told you I have this book, Mighty Blue Justice, and it does this whole section where it just breaks down all the different characters. Every one of them brings a smile to my face. Proto Clown, the Hulk, but he's a clown, like that kind of stuff. Man-eating cow. And even when they go like, celestial, if you want to say, they go out to the galaxy to pull people in. They have a Galactus clone, yes, but they have Thracker Zog, who's this like gelatinous alien that has kind of a tongue that also has a little head face kind of thing on it. Like, anyway, there's so much to pull from. And then when you look at the heroes that he's surrounded with, American made, right? The most competent character as a hero in the series who's no nonsense, but she's a great straight man for everybody else who's ridiculous around her. And then, some of these are pulled in where you have like the sewer urchin who's like, yeah, bad, definitely bad. He's just doing Dustin Hoffman from Rain Man, but it's still funny. It's Jess Hardell, who everybody knows, is Wacko from Animaniacs. But anyway, everything in the series is funny. And even if you never like watched it, you just saw the description, like I said in this book, it'll still make you laugh. Dinosaur Neil, you brought up earlier, he's running this kind of dinosaur bone park, and then he ends up, growing to a giant Godzilla-sized proportions later on in the series. I'll talk about this later. What happens to Dinosaur Neil? That's my tease, because he is not a one and done. We'll put it that way.
What else did I like about this show? Okay, the season premiere, season 3, where the Tick wakes up with a mustache and he doesn't know where the mustache came from, but like this mustache has like changed his life, and he's just strutting down the street of the city, and he's got his own theme song about the mustache. And like, I think it finally finds its footing when like the party's almost over.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoy season 3 so much more than season 1. That's a testament to like how in the 90s they gave you room to grow. You don't get that now. You gotta be a hit out of the gate. But like that silliness and that wackiness, and I could see like a kid liking that. I couldn't see a kid liking the pilot. It really is wacky and silly, and like that's what's fun about it. It's a fun universe. You mentioned all the characters, and again, these are probably jeers. I felt it was a little overwhelming because you would see like a crime starting to happen, and then some guy you've never seen before be like, "Oh, this is my chance," and then you find out he's a hero, and he starts like climbing the wall, and I'm like, "Oh, I guess he's getting in on this," and then you never see him again. You know, it's just like, if everyone in the city is a hero, then who needs saving?
But that's the joke. So in the comics, even more so, the idea is that being a superhero is just a fad that's happening right now. It's like going to the gym and doing aerobics, or, you know, whatever the hairstyle of the day is now you put on spandex and you pretend to be a superhero. And that's the cool thing to do.
And see, that was kind of what was funny to me. That's the cool thing to do if you are a middle-aged man. But their wives were always nonplussed.
Yes.
Like, they'd be like, "Oh, it's time to fight crime." The wife's like, "Yeah, go have fun, dear," and just keeps eating dinner.
Well, and it's kind of carried over in Mystery Men, right? Also, like Mystery Men is kind of a similar vibe to the Tick. And in fact, the Mystery Men comic book was, there's this guy who did this other series called The Flaming Carrot, and the Flaming Carrot and the Tick seemingly very similar, but the Flaming Carrot is even more scatological and wild and makes no sense, but it's so funny because it makes no sense. The Tick at least has the, you know, some common sense because Arthur is in the middle of it, playing the voice of reason. Like, he's sort of the straight man to the Tick, but he's also just like the caretaker of the Tick. He's like, there's this crazy giant man who came along in my life the same time I decided I wanted to be a superhero and not just a mild-mannered accountant. He decided to just sleep on my couch. And so Arthur's just along for the ride and trying to guide the Tick. And what I find so fascinating is the Tick is, you said he's a good team player. He really is. He's not introspective. He's not, you don't see things from the Tick's point of view. He is a force of nature going through everybody else's stories. So all these new characters that come in have to deal with the Tick. And that's what's funny about it, is you never like learn the origin of the Tick. You never have him sitting down considering, you know, like, oh, am I really a hero? I mean, there's like a few episodes where there'll be a little bit of that, but he quickly jumps out of anything of that nature. But there's especially something that I thought you would latch onto, well, and I know you didn't watch like 20 episodes in a row or anything, but there is a continuity to this series that is consistent all 3 seasons, and everything
the chair
builds
face thing.
Yeah,
the moon always has the CHA on it, and I remember that from back in the day, and like I loved that aspect of it, but like I didn't know. Tell me more.
Yeah. So also with the moon, I should just say, so yes, throughout the series, there's the CHA is as far as he gets, and every time there's a night shot and you see the moon, that's there. But then later on, when the Tick is involved with this Galactus style creature, he goes and lives on his body and rubs his feet for him and all this kind of weird stuff. He ends up taking a bite out of the moon. And then for the rest of the series, there's a bite out of the moon, you know? So it's just like, there's that. But there are storylines and characters that come in that you might think, oh, there's just going to be a one-off because the series is so wacky. You think, oh, well, why would they pick up on this, or why would it continue? Arthur gets a girlfriend, and her name is Carmelita, and she has the same moth costume as him. And you're like, huh? Is she just a fan who's imitating him? No, her father created the original flight suit that Arthur bought from this like estate sale type thing, and he just got it. And so she comes in and she's like, oh, my father built this, he's an inventor. And then she really likes Arthur, so they fall in love, and they have like just a continuous romance throughout the series. And Carmelita Leah brings in a lot of interesting devices, because her dad's an inventor. So that continues. She doesn't have a problem with the Tick, but she is always a wedge between the Tick and Arthur in his mind, because it's like a little kid, who's getting jealous. The Tick is like a 5-year-old, essentially is how he behaves. But in addition to that, there is Arthur's sister, whose name is Dot, and she's not a superhero. She's just always around, and she's voiced by Kimmy Robertson, if you guys know her. I always think of her as the wife in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. There's this couple that comes up to visit the next door neighbors, take them on the fishing trip, and he's like, Gerald, that man is flying. Anyway, so that's Kimmy Robertson to me.
I remember Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the series, more than I remember the neighbor from the movie.
But Dot ends up marrying Dinosaur Neil. Like that is something like she continues throughout the series. Then Dinosaur Neil comes back one more time, grows gigantic again. And it's Chairface Chippendale that is the mastermind behind that. Like, they bring all these characters from the first season back. But what's interesting is that it goes places, like you said, that normal children's television wouldn't go. It's a Jewish wedding. And at one point, because the Tick has been living with Arthur all this time, he thinks of them as a family. He's like, I never knew we were Jewish. And Arthur's like, Tick, you're not Jewish. I'm Jewish. You're bluish. Which is great. But they do a whole Jewish wedding ceremony and all of that as well at the end. So it's just like there's so many interesting elements that carry over, that these characters have actual arcs. And that I'm just naming a few of like the main character stuff with Arthur especially. But I mean, like all the characters, even the side characters, kind of have an evolution over time. And it's so fun to see. I do have to ask, Will, as we close out on Cheers though, like, do you have a favorite of the ones you watched? Was there one where you said, well, this story or this plot I liked?
Dinosaur Neil. But I mean, the mustache one too, but definitely Dinosaur Neil, because I knew what they were going for. I mean, I'm going back to this continuity thing, because that's so crazy they have a Jewish wedding, because it reminds me, like, Lord Zed and Rita Repulsa also have a Jewish wedding. And most Power Rangers fans are like, huh? Like, what are they saying? But like, I didn't know that continuity thing. I like that you said the childlike aspect, because I know we're not talking about that incarnation, but Patrick Warburton, when he stars as the first live action Tick, he said that his motivation was he always looked at the Tick approaching every instance with childlike wonder. It's not that he's dumb, he's not stupid. Every experience he has is for the first time, and he's experiencing it with like his whole self. And like looking at the character that way, then you really do kind of understand, like, because I didn't learn that till probably I was like deeper into the episodes, and then it changed my approach on things. And I don't hate the show. We'll get into jeers as to like the nuances there, but like I like what they were trying to do.
Okay, fair enough. I will say, as far as favorite episodes for me, I've always loved the episode where they go to the superhero nightclub. This is like the apex of, oh, this is what the cool kids are doing, is you go to the superhero nightclub, and in there, they have a sidekicks lounge. Okay, because sidekicks are not as cool as the superheroes, and they have to just sit in like this, bunker out back, and they're just like, it's really disappointing and disheartening for Arthur. But in the meantime, Tick is in there, and everybody's like, uh-oh, Barry's not gonna like this. They're like, who's Barry? Oh, he's the owner's brother, and he thinks he's the superhero. And Barry comes in, and he's the Tick. He calls himself the Tick, but whereas our Tick is blue, and you're just like, what does that have to do with being a Tick? Like, Barry is like kind of like brown and orange and fuzzy, and he's got a Tick-shaped shield, and he actually looks like a Tick. Like, his version makes more sense. And so he challenges the Tick for ownership of the name. And they have a battle, and he's like, renounce your name and call me the Tick. And he's like, Barry, 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 like you just have this little kid fight over who gets to be the Tick. And just that whole episode is so great. Number one, because you're introduced to so many wacky superhero characters, but also just like the conflict. And I always love the dark mirror version of our hero or whatever, like the imitation version of the main character appearing. So the Barry character has always stood out to me. But like that episode is the one I had like recorded on VHS and would always go back to because I thought it was so funny. Yeah, Barry, aka the Tick, is one of those great nemesis of our Tick.
Right.
Well, we've teased it long enough. It's time to find out why this show didn't work out in the long run, why it isn't as beloved as perhaps it deserved to be, as we get into our jeers.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
Take it away, Will.
All right, my problem with the show is that this is not a cartoon for kids. Just like we were saying with the Dana Carvey show, it was ahead of its time. This is why all of the Tick projects have failed. The Tick should not be a live action show. Amazon tried it, Fox tried it. It shouldn't be. It should be an animated series. But it should not be a kids animated series. It should be a prime time animated series. The Tick at its core is a sitcom. It has all the tropes that are not being exercised to their full extent on Saturday morning. Like, there's all these guys, and then there's Just American Made. Think of how many shows in the early 90s you're men behaving badly. It's the guys, and then there's the one woman who's usually like Paget Brewster, because I love her to death, but every show she was on got canceled. Like, Paget Brewster was the female voice of reason to bring the boys down, but also be their confidant when they're trying to date. It's an animated sitcom. And I feel to nerf it down for Saturday morning, they cut out its appeal to the middle of the audience, like that, like core audience. When we talk about how great it looks, it does look great to the point that like a little kid would stop on that and think it's awesome, but they're not gonna understand the plot. It's the same thing we said about the Cops, the cartoon, where it's too smart of a show to the point of almost being boring. Like when I was watching it, it made for good background entertainment. It's the kind of show you'd put on if you ran a comic shop but didn't really want to pay attention to it. But it's not riveting, but some of the jokes are really smart. The problem though is we don't have Adult Swim yet. It's like we're still carving out what does adult animation look like that's not The Simpsons. And so like it's ahead of its time in that aspect, but like its jokes are too smart, but its visuals are too dumb. So it loses a lot of its audience there. And that's my like big issue with it, I think it has a lot of appeal. I was watching this Jerry Springer documentary last night, and they were saying like when it got its craziest, their goal was for it to be entertaining with the sound off. It's never about the story, is that if you're flipping through channels, they need to produce something that makes you stop and stay on that channel. And I feel visually that's what the Tick did to get kids in there, but the writing and everything else failed them. Because it wasn't designed for them. It's like if you tried to make a Scud the Disposable Assassin cartoon for Saturday mornings. And they've tried. Like there are a lot of failed Scud pilots. But like I'm just saying, it just wasn't marketed to the right audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's saying something that when it was rebroadcast on Comedy Central, then it found an audience. To me, the ultimate example is Animaniacs, where a lot of those jokes are subversive and for adults, but the animation is so out of control and cartoony and wacky that a kid can appreciate it on that level. And yeah, like the Tick is a little too competent, and in its premise, it's dealing with the mundanity of urban living, but also mixing in superheroes and man-eating cows. The absurdity of it all doesn't work for a kid because a kid just takes things at face value, and they want, in this case, either straight action adventure, oh, I take this 100% serious. The stakes are real with Power Rangers or Batman or whoever, or they want just silly, silly, silly. And that middle ground, yeah, it doesn't connect in a big way unless you're somebody like me and my friend Colin. We loved the Tick, you know, and we would talk about little wooden boy, you know, like because the Tick, you know, at one point has a new sidekick that he builds out of wood and nails, little wooden boy. You know, just like stupid stuff like that you could grab onto, but most people would just kind of say, okay, but when's the real bad guy coming in, or that bad guy's not scary. Like there'd be funny things like there's these two villains that create a ray that chop off the Tick and Arthur's arms, but their arms are still alive, and then they steal their arms and build robots and attach the Tick and Arthur's arms to the robots and then send the robots out to do crimes in their name, and people can't tell that it's not the Tick and Arthur because it's their arms. You know, like there's so many levels to that, but a kid's just going to be like, wait, what? I don't get it.
Right, and connected to that, it didn't do its job, which every kid show at this time was expected to do, and that's sell toys. But at this point, it's a little more symbiotic of a relationship. In the 80s, you had the program length commercial. So everything we grew up loving was just to sell us toys. As you come out of the Reagan era and you get into the 90s, there's still some of that going on, but like there were toys to sell cartoons, but cartoons to sell toys, and sometimes the identity gets lost in there. So this is a situation, the toys failed, they didn't really help the success of the cartoon. But then you look at something that's a contemporary like Captain Planet. Captain Planet is a pretty successful, iconic franchise for the era, but do you know anyone who owned those toys? They were made by Tiger, the same company that was known for the we've got Game Boy at home electronic handheld games, made the Captain Planet toys, you know? And like it didn't work out. So sometimes things get left behind. In this situation, I would say the Tick cartoon getting 3 seasons and 36 episodes was much more of a success than the Tick toy line. But if they had figured out how to balance those scales, it might have helped both.
That is unbelievable, like that it actually made it that far, being, you know, so kind of, you know, in that middle ground gray area. I will say for Captain Planet, I think, again, the reason it was beloved, and the toys, I did have a few, I will say, but they were not.
I had Kwame and Matee just because I wanted their ring.
but the idea behind Captain Planet, again, is so straightforward, goody good guy, and such like ridiculous bad guys that I think, again, a kid can understand that. Good, bad, everything is like, we're going to save the environment. We're heroes. Like that makes sense. You have to sift through a lot of stuff to figure out what is the Tick about. And it isn't silly enough for me.
This is probably an episode of its own, and it definitely does deserve it. But also there's something to be said with Captain Planet in that it's really hard to be like, hey, you need to save the planet. And how about you expand your carbon footprint by buying these plastic toys? You know, because like
they should have been recycled plastics. Yeah.
But yeah, it's for college kids.
Yeah.
You know, like college kids, and like it getting the reruns on Comedy Central. This is a great Adult Swim prime time-esque cartoon. Like if you do Eek and the Thunder Lizards, followed by Tasmania, followed by Animaniacs, and then you bring in the Tick, it's just like you kind of hit a wall.
Yeah, it doesn't fit. Although I'm thinking about Adult Swim or Cartoon Network, like a double shot of Freakazoid and the Tick. That would be a great pairing right there, like doing those shows together, because Freakazoid's in a similar place. We'll have to talk about that someday at length. But
Freakazoid has the exact same problems as the Tick, only it doesn't have a failed toy line.
Yeah.
It was way too smart for its audience. It's way too wacky, but we'll get to the next part.
All right, well, Will, yeah, it sounds like you've got a plan. So we got to figure out if we can save the Tick as the show doctors. It did get 3 seasons, so it did have a good run being what it was without any major overhauls. But Will, what do you think it needed then? What was it missing?
I think it has potential as 2 different distinct projects.
Huh.
So at the time, you're right, it was a good run. I think honestly they should have done like they did with Batman the Animated Series and just put it in prime time. That's what I feel is wrong there. It could work for kids. And I have seen this executed recently for kids. Now, I've been home a lot lately, so I watch a lot of daytime TV, and I've never been a Scooby-Doo kid. Like, I've just never understood it. It just doesn't work for me. But I watch a lot of the modern incarnations because I don't need to know the celebrities. You know, it's just kind of like, oh, that's Gigi Hadid or whatever. Like, you watch the old ones, like, okay, I know Don Knotts, I know Phyllis Diller, I don't know this person. But, like, so there's a fairly recent-ish, it's in the last decade, one of those incarnations is called Be Cool Scooby-Doo. And it is known for being the more comedic show. It's less about like unmasking the monsters. It really kind of like dips into the absurdity, but like it's still juvenile enough that kids, I believe, would like it. I know I love it, but I'm not the target demo, but it's one of those where it's like it's supposed to work for the parents and work for the kids. So when you were mentioning the ton with the puppet, like it reminded me there's a lot of just absurd things in Be Cool Scooby-Doo. Like for some reason that I don't think they ever fully explain, Daphne is at war with all sea creatures. Like, so it's just kind of like, she can't go in bodies of water or they come to, like, attack her, you know, which comes into play later on. But then we find out in, like, the whole grand finale, and I'm sorry I'm about to spoil a decade-old show, but Fred's dad is this, like, master criminal, but he's, like, loony. Like, he was a really brilliant guy, and I don't know what happened to him, but he becomes, like, professor something. He'll just say the weirdest stuff. They'll be like, are you okay, Dad? And he'll be like, the fish will be here by morning. But he also has a hand puppet that he communicates through. And like the puppet would like when he wants to be heartfelt and actually convey his feelings to Fred as a father, then it comes through the puppet. And I'm watching this show and I'm like, you know, this is insane, but it still looks good. And like, it's wacky. Like when you see like all these schools of fish attacking the mystery machine, if I was like 5, I'd be like, oh no, Scooby-Doo, you know, like, and we talk about it like it's a testament to the quality of the show. I think Edlund might have been the problem. By him sticking around, he had this like integrity he wanted to keep with it, which you can respect, but sometimes network notes are good because network notes come from network people who usually know how TV works. So I think you kind of have to kitty it up a little bit. I'm not saying the animation gets worse. Maybe the jokes are a little lower hanging fruit. This could have worked as a kid show, but what they gave us was a primetime animated show.
If they wanted to go for a 4th season, I don't think anybody was going to buy more of what they were selling. I think it was just like, we get it. It lasted for as long as it did in the same mode. 5 stars, no notes from me. I love the series as it is. But if they were going to do a revamp to keep it relevant, 96 going into 97, I think they would need to go CGI with the Tick and kick it off with a 1-hour special called Cyber Tick, Extreme Adventures in the Circus of Circuits. It would just be like this wacky thing where he gets Tron-like sucked into a computer, and it would be CG. You'd probably get the team that created Reboot.
I was ready to say, Adam, it's going to be Reboot CG. People love to pretend they loved Reboot. Reboot gave me nightmares.
But it'd be a funny Reboot. Reboot was too sincere, And then probably it would only like, when they said, oh yeah, we're going to put it to series, it would only make it like 3 or 4 episodes, and then the budget would get out of control and the gimmick would have worn off, but it would have been a fun experiment. But Cybertick is what I feel like we needed to give it one tiny push, one last chance, and it would have been that blip that people, oh, I want a Cybertick action figure. We're doing a Kickstarter for a Cybertick series of figures,
Oh, Cybertick. Which is funny because that would be around the time that Cops came back as Cyber Cops.
Exactly.
But see, I thought you were gonna go like Tick Academy. Like maybe the Tick and Arthur open up an academy like an Xavier style
Well, they
school.
do. In the last episode of the 3rd season, the Tick is literally teaching a class on how to be a superhero.
So backdoor pilot.
Yeah.
So Tick Academy. We sell the toy license to Hasbro. We're in like new life.
I kept waiting for a Lady Tick, because we got Lady Arthur basically, but we never got Lady Tick, it just seemed
Well, I'm surprised they didn't force it in the cartoon. I looked for this and I couldn't find evidence, but I remember growing up, the Tick was always considered queer coded.
Oh,
But like,
I could see
I
it.
don't know if it's in one of the indie comics where like the code wasn't watching, but it's just kind of like, I've just always had in my head where it's like, well, he's kind of asexual, but if he were into anything, it'd probably be a male, but like, this doesn't come into play, and they're also not going to do that on Saturday morning in 1994.
Right.
They'd be like, oh, it's his roommate of 25 years, but then that's Arthur, and then they give Arthur a girlfriend.
Well, I mean, I talked about the jealousy he has with Carmelita, but that
it's
is
childishness.
Yeah, it's not a romantic jealousy. It's just like, you took my friend away. And I experienced that myself. I think I've talked about on a previous episode, So
I experienced that when you record Wizards.
Here's the thing, though, Will. So, animation, 3 seasons, and it's gone. But was the Tick really gone? Because Fox still believed in the concept, taking something you said. What if we put the Tick in prime time? But this time, it's live action. So next time around, we are going to check out this 2001 single season experiment that was The Tick, starring Patrick Warburton and a cast of amazing actors. This is going to be a lot of fun to get into. I have many stories about this series hitting the air as well that personally affected me. So I can't wait to share those as we come back around. But in the meantime, we invite everybody to stay connected with us at Remember Show Pod on social media, and make sure that you're telling us. We've been getting a lot of great communication, Will, just from people who are enjoying the show, asking like, oh, like where do you get your ideas, and do you take suggestions? Everybody has a favorite forgotten show that they want us to talk about, so we're always willing to hear and see if we could add that to the schedule, because there's a lot of things that's just like last minute. We're like, I just heard about this, let's talk about it. So we're certainly willing to have that conversation with you. But in the meantime, you can also check out our personal social media accounts. I'm at Hoju Coolander. Will, where are you at?
I'm at William B. West.
And so we thank you so much for checking out this episode. Make sure you check out all the other content available from the Retro Network and Geekster Media. But until next time, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.